evening. Once again, it is my privilege and pleasure to come and spend these few moments of your time. Selecting what is most relevant in the present scheme of things. So much is happening at this period time of transiting from one reality to the next. So much seems to be, shall we say, in a separate worlds. One side seeing one thing and the other something entirely different. So it is important, shall we say, always to stay on track, always to hold with one's personal vision that one is bringing into appearance. That is enough for us to begin our conversation.
Thank you. It's really good to be back with you here again today. Today I would like to continue off where we left last week with our conversation around health. And I wondered if we could start by having a chat around different ailments and illnesses or diseases, or even injuries perhaps, and would want to know if the same illness that's manifested in one person has the same or similar messages than it does if it's manifested in another. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Shall we say this? All events that is both internal and external arise from a position of perception. One sees what one wants to see. One interprets it in terms of one's values. Shall we say then, for some people, an illness or a disease is, shall we say, an attack from the outside. Shall we say it is out of their control, it is a medical decision, it is something that has nothing to do with self. That is, shall we say, most of it. Of course, the message is quite clear. This is someone who doesn't want to take responsibility for their own actions in life. That is, whether it is getting annoyed with someone or themselves, or whether it is tripping up over the pavement, or whether it is a serious effect. In all cases, shall we say, there are always, shall we say, messages before the message before the message. In other words, one always starts small, building up to greater and greater calls, shall we say, first of all a whisper, and then a stronger whisper, and then quite obvious talking, and eventually one is shouting. And if one refuses to hear, if one is deaf to it all, then of course the manifest reality appears as something out of control. You understand? Then there are those who recognize that they have something to do with it, and then one might project that out. It is my diet. It is the need to eat more herbs and take more of this particular material, this particular food, to stop that particular food. And on we go into creating a whole world where the attention is completely engrossed, shall we say, in one's diet. One is partially taking responsibility and partially ignoring that one always creates the reality out of the perception. Shall we say, also one comes from one's conditioning. That is, the perception is often, shall we say, inherited. Do you follow? And so it is quite common, shall we say, that one inherits one's disease from one's parents or aunts and uncles, some family, shall we say, and it is then known as genetic. It is a genetic disposition. You have no choice and no control. All of these are obvious. You understand, they are relevant and they are true. They are true in alignment with the perception one has of them. I am not making anyone wrong. You understand? However, if one wants to elevate that a little further, one might say it is the result, shall we say, of the fields, the electrical fields around me that are affecting my stability. That is, I can feel them, they are affecting my emotional tone. We are getting higher up the scale here. Of course, then we are taking some responsibility for the emotional tone. Then one might begin to recognize that one's emotions, one's history, one's associations with the past and with such experiences one has locked onto, of course, hold the point of perception in a limited view. Do you follow? If one takes that a little higher again, then one can see that it is beliefs that are being reflected in the physicality. One then is recognizing that ideas have consequences. They are, first of all, emotional. That is, how much energy do you hold them with? How certain are you of their existence, and so forth? If one were able to release, shall we say, such beliefs, I want to say nothing would change until the perception of self changes. Then one begins to shift. One begins to see that all of reality is limited and locked into certain perceptions. If one truly moves that point, one might then begin, shall we say, to enter, shall we say, a magical world. A magical world is capable of shifting anything. And so one experiences miracles. A miracle occurs when a shift in perception has happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So, how can we then work out what message a particular ailment or illness might have for ourselves?
Shall we say, there is an old saying, the body, the physicality is a microcosm of the macrocosm. Big words. As below, so above. As above, so below. So one can recognize that the physicality is a reflection of cosmic order. And that is why it is said that man is built in the image of God. So shall we say, then everything has its purpose. Shall we say, let us take, for example, there is a liver ailment. Lots of people have liver ailments. They are unable to process waste. You understand? How do you let go of waste if you have, shall we say, blockages? Blockages that are not dealt with turn into serious concerns. So various elements of the rectal passages occur. All sorts of things, shall we say, from diverticulitis to cancers, all sorts. All of it related to the release and the processing of waste products, things that are no longer viable for oneself and are toxic to the system. They can relate to all sorts of personal qualities. Even, shall we say, if one becomes emotionally connected, shall we say, to the recent pollution problem on the planet. You understand, pollution of the planet has to do with pollution in the system, both at the cosmic level and at the personal level. Does that make some sort of sense?
Yeah.
So it isn't whether there is pollution. Of course there is pollution on the physical level. It is how emotionally connected and churned one is with that. Shall we say the latest, of course, is your Alzheimer's and your dementia and your loss of memory. Of course. Of course everybody wants to forget. You understand what is there to remember? That one is trapped, that one feels out of control, that one's life is unimportant, and all of the other issues. That someone who is not interested in living. Do you follow what I mean? Who has given up because everything is out of control once again. And so it banks up in the processing elements. All of it, of course, is locked in by a ever hardening crystallization of the point of view, the perspective one has on the reality. Shall we take another view of this? Shall we ask for some thing that springs to your mind?
In terms of a particular ailment or illness?
Of course.
What about specific cancers? Each cancer
Of course.
has a different role in the body.
Of course, each one taking a different role, and each one to do with the processing of various things. You understand? Let us take the heart. The heart is an interesting one because the heart has many illnesses, but it is not associated with cancers. You understand? Of course, there can be associations. Of course, there can be cell growth secondary, but in the end, primary heart problems are not of that making. The heart is either, shall we say, broken, or it is closed down. Mostly, of course, it closes down. Mostly, of course, shall we say, the valves stop working. They disallow life to flow through them. You are, shall we say, tensed up and tight. Or one is such an open heart, and then you see what is happening and you are heartbroken, and the whole thing collapses. You understand? So it is, shall we say, all sorts. Shall you talk about the throat? Of course, the throat has two reasons. One, you cannot swallow it anymore. You cannot allow what is being forced down your throat to go in. So you develop methods for shutting it off. Do you understand? You cannot swallow. And other reasons, of course. One wants to shout, but you cannot, because you cannot open up. You are limited by fear, and always the fear is, if I do this, I will die. But of course, unless you are willing to die, you cannot live.
Interesting. So last time we spoke, you mentioned that many health challenges have their advantages. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what those could be?
Of course, because when one has a health challenge, a serious health challenge, fear will get you to change something. You understand, some people decide that they have not lived. So they take off, they leave their jobs that they hated, and they take off to explore what life is all about. And later on they discover miracles, a miracle healing. How did that happen? Because they changed their perspective. They freed themselves up from an old idea that one stays in one's job, one works hard to succeed, to add, to accumulate, and then later on wonder what happened to life. So, of course, such miracles can happen in any form once one shifts one's perspective.
Okay.
You understand, sometimes there are healers. Healers often will do things that are completely, shall we say, out of the ordinary. They will suggest things that are completely foreign. You understand, so in your modern times, you are beginning to experience what is commonly called plant medicines, such things that completely throw the old way of viewing into disarray. Completely, you can never go back. You have been opened, shall we say, to the inner worlds in a moment that completely throws you off track. Of course, such products have long effects, because if the perception, the point of perception has shifted, it is often quite by a radical amount, and sometimes it takes a long time for it to settle again anywhere permanently. Does that make some sort of sense?
Yeah, referring to ayahuasca.
One of them. Of course, there are many of such materials, and they all have their own signatures.
So what are your thoughts then about the risks, the risk factor around partaking in something like that?
Shall we put it this way? What is there in life worth doing that is not a risk? You want to start a business. It is a risk. Even at the basic level, you want to buy a house, and it is a risk. You want to drive your car on the road, that is a risk. Everything, even walking to the shop, is a risk. The question is, what are you willing to risk? What are you willing to risk? If you have, shall we say, a health issue, let us take something that is quite serious, shall we say, some autoimmune. You can go on a regime, you can change your diet, you can try a million things. And as long as you are trying to control this, nothing will shift. Then you are told that there is one method that is a risk. And I am not saying for everyone this is the right thing. But in this case, shall we say, the risk is to try your ayahuasca. You decide that nothing could be worse than where you already are. So is it a risk to take that material? There's no risk in it at all. Because to stay where you are is a far greater risk. Nothing will change that way. So you try to take this material, and suddenly you are in a different world. When you find yourself back in your physicality, it is hard to find the components that are necessary in order to create this reality. I want to be clear, because many people hang themselves on words that we might speak as if this is, shall we say, true for everyone, and that is not the case. Every individual is in their own world. And for those, shall we say, who are heavily invested in the medical world, should remain in that world. Everyone who has tried everything and nothing works, then and the medical world has given up, then they should try everything. You understand what I am saying? I am saying because otherwise we can get ourselves in trouble with, shall we say, the laws, because the laws want to keep control of the perceptions. Otherwise, where will you be if society has many perceptions and the social order is not maintained in a hierarchical fashion? Do you understand? As this breaks down, because inevitably in the transition of this period, the hierarchy will break down. And then everyone becomes accountable. And you are seeing this all around you.
So my next question was around healers, and I'm curious to understand if healers are born healers or if anybody can learn the art of healing.
That is a more difficult question to answer, because in many ways healers are born with a certain talent. You understand? And one of those talents is, shall we say, to bring someone along with them into what is often called the healing journey. The healing journey is a series of components, shall we say, that shifts the perceptual point. Do you understand? All of it arises from shifting that way of looking at the world. So healing, shall we say, when one is healed, one views oneself with quite a different perspective. Do you understand? Some healers, shall we say, religious, they will, shall we say, align you with some, I don't want to call it fictitious, but some inner source of power, whether that is Jesus or whatever you want to call it. Could be the Buddha or Krishna or whoever. You are aligned with it, and then you are given the message from that source that you are healed. Done. That is miracle. But you are a different person. You are not the sick person. You are now the religious person. One has to ask which is better. Certainly, one who is suffering and then is no longer suffering is much better off. Who are we to judge? Do you understand what I mean? Because sometimes when, shall we say, the perceptual point has been shifted, it oscillates around looking for some stability, and that is the perfect position for it to be, to analyze its own system. You understand? To analyze what is available to it. And that might open, shall we say, the world of investigation. And then, shall we say, a person is on a journey to understand self. And what are we all doing here but to encourage everyone to begin to understand themselves. to really come to terms with what they are as spiritual, intellectual, emotional, and physical beings. Because you are the whole. You are not as yet left the physical realm. So you are all of these in one framework.
So do we need to, or do some of us need to revisit our past in order to heal, perhaps?
If one is locked into the past, in other words, if one has emotional correlates, that is, ideas and memories, shall we say, often, shall we say, always, misinterpretation of the meaning of events. In other words, one creates an event and then adds, shall we say, judgments to it in ways that leave, shall we say, scars in the emotional body. Then, of course, one has to come back to the scar. Scar tissues are, if you like, misinterpreted layers, even on the physical body. If, shall we say, the cells align, it will heal without scars. But if the cells misalign, that is, they overlap, then physical scarring must occur. Do you understand? So let us say, historically, it is part of understanding oneself and one's purpose. Do you understand? The purpose of life was to unfold itself so that you could free yourself up from the limitations that a physical reality puts on.
And finally, what about the beings that have been incarnated in a body and are ill from birth? What can you talk to us about that a bit?
Agreements occur, shall we say, between parents and children at the moment of conception. Some babies, shall we say, some souls only need to touch the physical world. Others come in order to show a certain way forward. Others are held in place by the, shall we say, the connection between parents and their children. There are some children that come in apparently with, shall we say, a disability. In most cases, the disability holds a great gift. So, shall we say, some children are called the autistic, but in many cases they are functional to the point they are geniuses. But they have given up other abilities to become that way. So many of these children are incapable of social interactions. They cannot interact because their attention is on their point of interest. They are guiding, of course, they are showing human, ordinary people that you can become focused to a point where you can achieve something. The great gift is, can you be focused and then unfocused so you are not caught in it? Some children, some people are born, shall we say, with seemingly intellectual handicaps, but you will not feel love from any person better than these. They show the world the capacity of love. It is, and yet humans always want to judge this. You follow some children come to bring love out of their parents. To understand some child that is sick for their lives, bring care out of communities. And everyone begins to adopt them as their own child. They build the community a central focus, not that they are playing on it, but they have come for that specific purpose. And shall we say, it is a game. That is the most important thing, because humans always want to see death as a finality. But you are playing a board game. If you lose, you are knocked off. Next round, next time, I'm going to play a different game over here with these people. I shall join this game. Do you understand? Because when you see it in this fashion, if you are not locked into the old, then you are free. And you are not so much grieving the loss as celebrating the time, celebrating having this person in your life. Then their life was worth it. Do you understand? To grieve is to bring it down. Of course you are going to miss them. But missing them in that fashion is one of, shall we call them, the perceptions, the limited and locked perception is, I am missing out. Many people are missing out. Everyone has, I am missing out on this or that. I want to be here. I want to be involved in, what are you talking about? And so on, and interfering all over because I might miss out on something. How can you miss out if you are one with everything? Do you understand? But that perception is very fluid. The point of perception then is not limited to any perception. Then, shall we say, you meet someone in the street, you listen to them and you become their perception. You are not having any difficulty in shifting to their perceptional point. You can see that it creates a reality that is as valid as anybody else's. It is part of the whole. And so you move through life, shall we say, joining with each and another, so that you become a greater being. These are called the masters. Not so many alive, but some. and more people are beginning to access this in moments of time. Is that enough for today?
It is. Thank you very much. Do you have any final comments before we wrap things up?
I think it is a very interesting sequence of questions. Thank you, and good evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much.